Hi readers, today I'm going to be doing a non-spoiler review for Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. I think I've been pronouncing her name wrong for the longest time, so hopefully I've got it right now. Normally I do 1-minute reviews, but I'm trying something a little bit different today, so definitely let me know if you like this type of video better than the 1-minute reviews. It's still going to be a non-spoiler, and I'm going to be talking about 3 things: world building, characters, and plot. I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible, but if there's a specific topic that you're more interested in, I will be putting chapter times in the description box below. So let's jump in and start talking about the world of Shadow and Bone, which is probably my favorite thing about this story. This is my first introduction to what is known as the Grishaverse, so I have not read any of the other books that take place in this universe. If you're not familiar with Shadow and Bone, it has a lot of Russian influences, both in the names of people and places and the names of certain objects, which I found really new and interesting and refreshing. I haven't read a lot of Russian folklore or Russian-inspired fantasy before, so it was new for me. I'm just going to pull up the map here real quick. I was thinking about this beforehand. I'd be really curious to know if anyone else does this. But when I see these words that are, obviously inspired by other languages, when I read them and I hear them in my head, I almost hear them with like an accent. So, for example, there's a town on this map called I can't even pronounce it. Polizena. And in my head, I'm like, Polizena. Something like that. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. Let me know. So I really liked the setup of this world. So we have our main country, Ravka. It's apparently been at war with some neighboring countries for a while because Ravka has these powered people called Grisha. Now, the Grisha in this world are basically magicians, but they refer to them as practitioners of the small science. In this world, anyone can be a Grisha. Their children are tested for it at a young age to see like what their power is, and yeah. I also like that there is a hierarchy within the Grisha. I think anytime you have a group, it's important to have a hierarchy within that group. I think it really helps to set up the fact that I feel like it helps to make it more realistic. So for the Grisha group, the person that is in charge is the Darkling. So I'm going to jump over to characters now, because my biggest problem with this book is the main character, Alina, which is sad for me to say, but unfortunately, Alina is one of those characters that falls into the generic YA female protagonist role. Like, she's one of those, oh, I'm just an average girl, there's nothing special about me, but actually I have this, power inside of me I didn't know I had. And to be fair, this book was written in 2012, so it is 10 years old, and I feel like we've kind of moved past that trope a little bit now, so it was a little jarring to have to go back to that. But really, other than that, all we know is that she's an orphan, and we don't really get much information about her backstory. Like the Duke that she allegedly lived with for most of her life, we don't really know anything about him. There's a couple small flashback scenes, but nothing that gives us any really like deep understanding of her character. She doesn't have any strong personality traits either. One of my friends over on Instagram said it best: she is a blank slate. Now, I've heard that she does get more developed in later books. I'm definitely going to be reading them to find out if that happens. But my favorite character in this series was probably the Darkling. Now, I can't talk too much about his character without giving him away, but the Darkling is the leader of the Grisha, and his power is basically the power of darkness. So when you think of, shadows coming to life and, you know, nighttime. Like, that's his power. And apparently he is the only one that has this power, and I guess that makes him super powerful. I'm not quite sure why. Maybe that's explained later. I don't know. But he's kind of like a rock star among the Grisha. So he is responsible for their whole hierarchy, their whole, they refer to themselves as the second army, the first army being the soldiers, and them being the second army that protect their country. And I really like the Darkling. As the story goes on, we start to find out more and more information about him, and he's definitely one of the more fleshed out characters in this book. And I definitely got a Thanos vibe from him. If you're a fan of the Marvel movies, you will know what I'm talking about. So, yeah, other than Elena and the Darkling, because Elena is so bland, it does help to make the people around her more interesting. There's a couple characters within the Grisha hierarchy that I really, really liked. One was Genya. She, you know, actually has a really interesting story going on, some history that I found really, really fun. And then there's also this character, Mal, that Elena was friends with when she was a child. I really didn't like him in the beginning. I kind of came around a little bit on him at the end, but overall, characters other than like the Darkling and a few others was not the strength of this story. And then we have the plot. And as the first book in this big fantasy world, it has kind of a simple plot. We have, like I said, a young orphan girl. She doesn't think she's anything special. Then she discovers that she is. And she has to try and learn how to use this power, etc., etc., yada, yada, yada. We've kind of heard this story before. But something that does make this interesting and unique, besides, like I said, you know, all the Russian influences, is we have the stag. When I first started reading this book, I was like, oh, you know, there's the stag on the cover. What does the stag have to do with anything? I'm not going to give it away, but basically it calls back to a lot of classic folklore and classic fairy tales where we have animals that are super important. You can put two and two together. There are very specific stories that I think of when I find out what happened, and you will get around to that eventually. So you know, Alina has to try and learn how to use her powers, but as she finds out about like what's really going on within the Grisha community, she has to decide if she's going to be who they want her to be, or if she's going to be who she wants to be. By the end of the book, I was happy with the way that things turned out with Alina and her journey, and it did a good job of wrapping up the main storyline, but still, you know, leaving a couple things open-ended for the future books. So overall, I think Shadow and Bone is a good, not necessarily great, but a good first step into what has the potential, because I see the potential there, to be a bigger, better, and greater fantasy world. So those are my thoughts on Shadow and Bone. If you like this type of video, especially if you like it more than the 1 minute review, please give it a thumbs up. Let me know which type of video review you like better. And if you're not already, please subscribe to my channel. I do new reviews every Wednesday, new videos on Sundays, and sometimes on Fridays. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Happy reading.